Hello there and welcome. I'm Michael Hailey. I'm the pastor at New Day Church in Brandon, Florida, and I thank you for joining me today. If you follow me the last few weeks, you know that lately in my sermons I've been on kind of a roll with Charlie Brown illustrations. So what's one more, right? Here it is. Charlie Brown is needing to kick an extra point to win the football game. Do you remember this cartoon? And each time he's tried in the game to kick so far, Lucy, his holder, has pulled the ball away from him right as Charlie Brown goes to kick, and then, of course, he falls on his back. But this time, she says to him, "Come on now, Chuck. We really need this one. We can win the game. I promise I'll hold the ball firm." So the crowd in the stands are yelling, "You can do it, Charlie Brown. Hang in there, Charlie. You can do it." And Charlie Brown runs at the ball and gives it a mighty swoop of the leg, and sure enough, Lucy pulls the ball away again. And then the camera pans on to Lucy and she says to herself, "I just couldn't help myself." Isn't that great? Listen, here's life. You try to do well. You want to kick one through the uprights. You want to score, right? You want to accomplish, to succeed. But when that doesn't happen, when we don't succeed, what do you hear from those you love? Hopefully you hear things like, "No worries, it's okay, you've got this, just hang in there," right? Say that phrase with me, hang in there. But here's the question, how do you do that? How can you truly hang in there, especially when life throws its absolute worst at you? Two things today. First of all, we hang in there through patience. Listen to this from James in chapter 5. He says, "Dear brothers and sisters, be patient," there's the word, "be patient as you wait for the Lord's return." In other words, literally, hang in there while you're waiting for Jesus to come back. "Consider the farmers who patiently wait for the rains in the fall and in the spring. They eagerly look to the valuable harvest to ripen. You too must be patient." And that's the key word from James today, patience. Now, these early Christians James was writing to were living in some extremely difficult times. Many were suffering because of the greed of others. Still others were persecuted and even enslaved by the wealthy and those in positions of power. So to counter that bitterness arising from the disparity and inequity, James says to them, hang in there. Be patient because help and hope is on the way. And then James uses three different illustrations to make his point. I didn't read the verses to you, but let me just paraphrase for you. He mentions the early prophets. He said, be patient like the prophets were patient. Because the prophets in the Old Testament were oftentimes condemned, maligned for preaching the truth about God and His will for the people. Yet they all hung in there. They endured with great patience. Jeremiah, Isaiah, Ezekiel, they all endured with great patience as they fulfilled their calling from God. And then James uses Job as an illustration, as a reminder. You remember him, don't you? Job was the most righteous man of his day, yet he lost everything that he had. He lost his wealth, his possessions, and most sadly, he lost his family. Yet, through that horrific ordeal, Job never lost his faith and trust in God. Rather, he chose to persevere and to patiently walk with God through his healing and ultimately through his restoration. And then finally, James illustrates patience with the farmer, those verses I read a moment ago. Now, why does James use a farmer as an illustration? Well, because farming really takes some patience. I mean, doesn't it? Are you familiar with farming? If so, you know that it takes a lot of patience. You see, a farmer can control the soil that is tilled or how it's tilled. He can control what seed is put out and where he or she wants to put that seed. But a farmer cannot control the elements, can he or can she? The sun, the rain, those kinds of things. All the farmer can do really is his job and then wait. Wait patiently on God's provision and God's timing. So how does that apply to us, or does it apply? Listen to what Pastor Jake Barker's his take on all this. See, this is really good. He says that we have kind of all gone all in on impatience in our society rather than patience. We market our products with words like instant, on demand, like fast food. Do you remember when there was one little lane for you to order and pick up? And if the baby threw her binky out the window, no problem. You just open the door and walk around and pick it up, right? Not anymore. Because in most fast food places today, there are multiple lanes for traffic. So if your kid drops his or her binky out the window, it takes 5 people to stop the cars, block all the lanes before you would dare even exit the vehicle. Do you know why? It's all because someone in corporate one day said, hey, you know what's wrong with the world? Fast food is just not fast enough. We need more lanes to our drive-thru. Speed this thing up because people got to have their fries like right now. Or the theme parks. Here in Florida, we have Disney World and we have Busch Gardens, to name a couple of them. And the number one patience problem with people have in places like those are what? The long lines for the rides, right? Sometimes, in fact, you can go to Disney World over here, and sometimes it takes an hour or two just to ride one time. So what did they do to correct that? It was a moneymaker, but it was also good for many people. They created Fast Pass. Now I think they call it Lightning Lane, where the theme park elite can waltz past all the sweaty, miserable people and get on the ride first. With sort of an attitude, too. Yeah, that's right. We're going to the front here. And it's called Lightning Lane. Speed up. Let's get in a hurry. I remember the first time we went to Disney, we'd traveled out from Oklahoma to Jacksonville where I was doing a seminar, and we drove on down to Orlando to go to Disney World. My son Josh, who was in the 3rd grade, had just broken his ankle and was on crutches with a big boot around one leg. And so when we went up to the first ride that we wanted to ride, one of the people attending that ride said, oh, you folks need to come with me. And they marched us right up to the very front of that line. And I'm thinking, this ain't a bad deal. And so we rode that line and quickly went to another ride. Same thing happened. They ushered it right to the front. Well, by the time the day was over, I didn't even wait. We just walked right up to the front, showed my son's crutches. They put us right on the ride. We rode every single one of those rides as quickly as we wanted to ride. I mean, we were up there first in line all day long. Now, it kind of sucked for Broken Ankle Boy, but it was great for the rest of the fam. You know what I mean? What a country. Yeah, right. A country with no patience. Verse 7 and 8 again says, therefore be patient, brothers and sisters, until the coming of the Lord. Notice how the farmer waits for the precious fruit of the earth and is patient with it until he receives the latter and early rains. You also be patient. Establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord draws nigh. In other words, hey, the Lord is coming soon, and no matter what you face, He will deliver you. He will give you His remedy, His solution. His answers are coming, which simply means this for us. While you are hanging in there, while you're at that stage in life where you're just kind of hanging in there, while you're doing that, God won't leave you hanging. He will walk with you and provide for you every step of the way. So hanging in there is about patience. And secondly, hanging in there is about God's promise. Now, there are some verses in Deuteronomy chapter 11 that James is actually paraphrasing here in his writing in chapter 5. Let me read a couple of them to you. In verse 14 of chapter 11 in Deuteronomy, God says, I will send rain on your land in its season. Now, by the way, that's so important to hang on to right there, those 3 words. In its season. Both autumn and spring rains, so that you may have grain, new wine, and olive oil. I will provide grass in the fields for your cattle, and you will eat and be satisfied. Now in chapter 5, James paraphrases these verses. And when he does, he's not just talking about farming and the rain and the crops. He's also making a much larger point. And that larger point is in actuality a promise God has given His people, and that includes us. And the promise goes something like this. God will give me what I need when I need it. Both of those are important. What I need, when I need it. Now remember, James was talking to a group of people who were being persecuted for their faith. People who had been uprooted from their homes and their way of life. And to them he says, remember now, God has promised that He will give you what you need when you need it. Now think about that promise. God says He will give me what I need. And that's important to me because I have a lot of needs. Do you have needs? Sure. And so that's important. But He never promised me He would give me what I want. Now there are some verses that say God will give us the desires of our heart, and many times He does do that. But primarily, the Bible tells us that He gives me my need over my want. And how many of you know there's a ginormous difference between needs and wants? You see, we live in a culture where the lines between wants and needs have often been blurred or really completely obliterated. For most people, there's really no difference between wants and needs. Because the only way I can think to be happy is to get what I want. And therefore, I need what I want in order to be happy. Does that make sense? So give me what I want. That's pretty much the way our culture operates today. Let me just pose this question to you. How many of you have ever said you wanted something that you found out later it would not have been good if God gave that to you? Right? Have you prayed about someone or something? I need that. I need him. I need her. And then a little later you decided that probably wasn't the best for me. Maybe it was a person you wanted to date in school and maybe even marry. Do you remember him? Do you remember her? And now you see them on social media, right? These many years later, and you look at the picture and you go, whoa, I've dodged a bullet on that one. Right? You know what I mean? Of course, we have to be careful with that kind of thing because there may be someone out there saying the same thing about us. So listen, be thankful that God is concerned and caring enough to say, I love you enough to not always give you what you want, but always give you what you need. Then the second part of this promise, God says, I will give you what you need when you need it. Now, how many of you know timing is so important in everything? Like these verses in Deuteronomy that speak of rain in its season. And by the way, let me just say as an aside, are you like me in that my timing is not always the same as God's timing? Does that happen with you too? Do you know why that is? At least for me, it goes back to patience. I have no patience sometimes. Too often I'm in this rush, which is really silly because not only is God's timing always different than mine, it's always better than mine. You see, God has this thing called perspective that unfortunately too many people seem to lack these days. Think about it. He's got perspective because He's been around for eternity. Us? Well, we're much younger. He sees into the future. We do not. Which means I can trust Him to give me what I need when I need it. Because don't forget this, the Bible says love is patient, right? So if love is patient and God is love, it just follows then that God is patient. And because we have His Spirit living in us, it also follows that we have His patience living in us as well. So listen, I can be patient because at my spiritual core, I am patient. Such a deal, right? So I guess the question becomes, where's my focus? Is it on what I want when I want it? Or is my focus on Jesus who gives me what I need when I need it? And by the way, this is another one of those easier said than done sort of things. Because often our first impulse is, how can I get out of this situation, right? How can I get out of this situation as quickly as possible? How can I fix it? How can I run away? How can I get rid of that person, place, or thing, or whatever? James responds, be patient because Jesus is coming back soon. He is on His way. And until that day, His answers are coming. His grace, His mercy, His forgiveness, and His wisdom is coming. Whatever you need, just when you need it, He will provide. So hang in there. Let that patience in you come out of you because you can do it, Charlie Brown. Look at someone next to you and say, hey, I'm Charlie Brown. And you are in that regard. Hey, thanks for joining me today. I'm so happy that you did. If I can help you with anything, personal message me on social media or just shoot me an email, mhailey777@gmail.com. I'll answer your questions, pray for you, anything I can do to help. Have a great week this week. Be patient, and we'll see you soon. God bless.
Bye-bye.